This is Rethinking Mundane with Jo and Lex.
Where industrial design and creative technologist looks at everyday objects, questions its purpose, tries to repurpose it, imagines its future, or just leaves it alone. And today is a big one that I don't know if we can leave it alone because it's constantly evolving. But we are going to talk about
The internet.
slash the web.
Yes, well, let's first establish what is the difference between the internet and the web.
Cool. So I've actually got this here because I actually didn't know the thing. So I went to our friend ChatGPT and I asked it, okay, what is the difference of the web and the internet? And it says the terms web and internet are often used interchangeably, but they refer to different things. So the internet is really a network of computers that are connected globally. It's the infrastructure that allows different computers to servers and devices to be able to connect with each other. So that allows for email, file sharing, you know, being able for, websites, speak to a server. Where the web is a subset of the internet. And so the web uses the internet to transmit web pages, which are documents, because if you think of code, they're essentially documents that are hosted on a server that are transmitted over the internet to another that in the server elsewhere transmitted to your computer through the internet. And so you browse the web through a web browser, which is sort of your gateway to the internet. I think I've got that right.
Yeah.
If there's any tech snobs, leave me alone. Done my best.
So there's my understanding, there was Web 1,
Yep.
which was the first version of the internet, which was sort of, late 90s, when the internet first came up, websites started to be a thing.
Yeah.
And they were very basic,
Yeah.
very one way. You could sort of access a page, but you couldn't interact with that page.
Yeah.
There might be sort of buttons, but they would almost just be
Yeah.
very, very simple, just like kind of you could look at it on a PDF
Yeah.
effectively. And then Web 2 came up in the 2004.
Yeah.
And that was when it started to become two-way, but more interactive, allowed for social media effectively, where
Yeah.
you could put something out and people could comment on that, could interact with that, and that's where we're at the moment. But the challenge that obviously comes with certain companies taking a big percentage of the pie, in effect, means that they then have a lot of control over that movement of information and can collect a lot of information and collect a lot of data.
Yeah.
And maybe we should just touch on that. We should start with the way that we use the internet and what we think are the benefits and the
It's an interesting one because I feel like Web 1 seems to be that time of just elite creativity because there's so much like I remember like there was a time recently and it's something when I started designing websites where I took on board was this thing of brutalist web design where it was almost like because what had happened when you got to that Web 2 era, iPhone gets introduced, more screens get introduced, became the standardization of how UX UI design, how web design should be. And brutalist web design was almost this thing of like, let's go back to the throwback of the 90s and almost like, big FU to rules and standards and all of these things. So I really like that. And then I guess, the social media era, which is really interested, where the content, if you think of Web 1, the content was created by a bunch of publishers or people who created content and then people interacted with that content, where this time around, we're almost creating these platforms where the content is generated by us, the users. And that's almost a place. And then we are now designing for a design's purpose at that point, then is maybe to influence that stickiness of how do you design something that's sticky, How do we design something that's quite addictive? How do we have people spend a lot of time on the internet? Because our business model is essentially selling engagement. That's where those advertising models have come in. So the internet is still free for most of the services, free for us to use. But somebody selling content, we're getting sold ads to us, and then the companies are getting savvy in learning how to sell ads, and companies have made billions and billions and billions across, but it's come with its pitfalls, right?
Yes, I think that's the thing that's quite fascinating, because the idea of having all these tools at our disposal for very little money, really, is amazing. I mean, you can go online and find out information about things. You don't have to buy a book. You can just Google everything. You can find out what the news, what's happening on the side of the world. As you say, you've got access to so much for free.
Yeah.
And yet people are making a huge amount of money from the internet. So it's really easy to just forget that nothing in life is free. So you've got to be giving away something.
Yeah.
And that's obviously where big data comes in. And I think it's really easy for us to just think that people are buying and selling, like our email address and our name and our date of birth. But obviously that's worthless to somebody on its own. It's more the nuances around collective behavior, building up kind of profiles, putting you in categories of different profiles, and then selling those to companies who can then advertise to you.
Yeah.
Or we were talking about it a minute ago, but just if someone says that they're maybe moving, or they're having a baby, or they got a new car or something, suddenly you're opening yourselves up, putting yourself in a different box to be marketed to, and that piece of information is really very valuable.
Yeah.
But the thing I guess that then leads to is, well, a couple of things. One is identity. So what does it mean? How has the internet sort of changed who we are?
Yeah.
And how we interact. And most people have like a sort of an online self
persona,
and an offline self.
But it almost goes back, right? Because obviously Web2 is built on this concept that you're either a content creator or you're a consumer. So it needs content creation, and you could be both at the same time. It's not like it has to be distinctively, but it's almost created this new economy, this new universe. And I guess for us lot, where we came up in Web2, where we built our businesses off the internet. I'm sitting here talking about my company for the last 10 years because it came from the internet. I was a consumer of it, but I also created content for the world to recognize and see that. And then we talked about this as well in the CV episode, where it was about that challenge of identity. But one of the challenging things, right, with Web 2, which maybe leads us into the segue of Web 3, was we create these identities, but we don't own these identities. It's so hard to delete your Instagram account. I don't think you could delete your Facebook account and you would come back. I'm not even sure which one you can't delete. If you delete it, you deactivate it, and then you can't delete it for good. I can't remember. I think I used to have this, but like that challenge of control, who controls it? Or right now, as these companies want to push more of their ads, or push you more to move in ads. For example, when we talk about Instagram's discoverability and its stuff for small businesses has now become much more challenging than ever before. Once upon a time, the timeline used to be, I can never pronounce this word correctly, in order of...
Yes.
Can you pronounce it? I can't pronounce it, but, chronological
order.
Sorry, I forgot the word.
And now it's a mess.
Now it's a mess, right?
It's a mess, and there's ads everywhere, and you're being pushed content that you aren't, or from people you're not following, that has a risk of pushing you more and more into like a particular bubble.
Yeah.
And I think the other aspect of identity that's quite interesting is if you almost kind of put out into the world, even in a small way, that you're interested in. I will give you an example of what we were talking about in the office the other day. But if you've got back pain and you're interested in learning how to stretch out your hips and your back, and you follow a couple of people who are doing, demonstrating some exercises, suddenly your entire everything changes, and all your feed is filled with stuff about release your shoulders in 15 seconds. And then and that's fine. That's a kind of safe example. But it could also be that you followed someone who turns out to be quite extreme, and then you're like watching some of that content, and it may be that you're watching it not from interest or like that you believe in it, but actually from disbelief. But it doesn't matter. The fact is, you watch that content, it generated an emotion in you enough for you to keep watching it. And then you get fed more, and then you get started there's a risk that you start thinking in that way. And then actually it starts to shift and change your entire perspective on life, because you're stuck in this bubble, believing that everybody that in the world is thinking in the same way that you now think. And I think that's when the internet becomes quite powerful in a scary way, because it allows people, to you collecting data and data sets and profiles and personas to market to and to sell to, and that's kind of harmless. But now you're giving it to politicians, and now you're giving it to far right groups. You're giving it to people who are trying to change the direction of the way that we think, and that's kind of scary.
I think it's a challenging thing, right? Because I think the initial goal of the internet is meant to, or the World Wide Web is meant to be this free space where people can create content and put stuff. I think the challenging thing is sometimes when we design things, we tend to not think of the way sometimes the design thinking process is normally framed as, was it empathize, define? I can't remember. I don't know why I attempted to try. But
I thought you were a designer, Lex.
Hey, I just know how to make stuff. I ain't know how to think. But a lot of times when you think of personas, we always think of like good actors. This person is gonna use the internet and they're gonna make art or they're gonna promote themselves. We're here, and then we forget that no, the human condition is very complex, and so when we create these things, we have to pay attention to the complexities of the human condition, and we still don't know how to. We still haven't addressed that well. Because I think in this optimization, we talk about, remember, like as a designer, maybe working on some of these platforms and stuff, your target or your focus might be about how do you optimize for more engagement. Because these companies need more engagement for you. More engagement equals more money. So even if it's bad content, more engagement is what the algorithm is what's going for. And we still don't have a design. We still don't do that really well, I've worked on a project with Caroline Sinders around, it's called a Carebot. We created it just like late 2019, early 2020, and it's something that's come up recently because it was exhibited at the Science Gallery just 2 weeks ago as part of their AI exhibition. But one of the things of that project was this thing of like online harassment, because these Web2 platforms or the social media platforms in case on the internet, there's still a lack of resources or lack of help if you have been harassed on the internet and there isn't really like mediums in place. So it's still this thing of when we've got these platforms now that are obsessed about user generated content, but maybe might like a polarized piece of content, it causes problem. And that's when you have propaganda, the wrong information being shared, or manipulation. There's there's a really interesting talk on TED Talk by a lady called Carol. I can't pronounce her surname, but I think she was at the Guardian. She talks about Cambridge Analytica and how manipulation of the town she comes from in Wales, how that information was shared with them in a particular way, which manipulated their choices for the Brexit vote and stuff like that. And that's interesting. And now it leads to this conversation, or there was this hype at one point about Web 3.
Mm.
So, Joe, you know,
You're gonna ask me to give it. You're gonna ask me,
uh,
an industrial designer, to explain what Web3 is.
cool. So, Web 3.
You're gonna read it off ChatGPT.
Web 3. This is an area I still don't understand because I didn't tap into it, fortunately. I know I have friends who may watch this and they know Web3. So, from what ChatGPT has said, Web3 is about this concept of decentralization. It's a work in progress and it's an ever evolving concept aiming to create a decentralized web. A lot of this has been amplified by blockchain technology, which personally I still don't understand myself, which is bad. But the whole aspect is, I guess, is this thing of right now, Web 2 is centered around our data and we don't have control of that. And the space is all about maybe having decentralized networks where we are in control of the data we're in control of the engagement, our actions, our insights, and all of these things. And I guess we are able to like somehow, yeah, find, but yeah, I guess it's about we. I haven't seen any good use cases as of yet.
No.
I guess the NFT hype was trying to be this aspect of decentralization, but I guess, like I said, the human condition is quite complex, right? Because I think NFTs for a period of time got so obsessed around bringing them same capitalistic models and frameworks, and so didn't really create a decentralized environment. I think it's still so new that I think the value of these concepts will come over time. They still need a while in order for us to, because it's almost a new behavioral change. And
There's certainly an appetite for it, in that people are waking up and being like, wait a second, I don't feel like I've got control over what happens online. I feel like there's content creators who are putting content out, but they can see the impact of that content changing because of changes to the algorithms. Businesses are going out of, like seeing sales dropping overnight because Instagram or Facebook or whatever has changed the algorithms, which means that their marketing isn't hitting the way it was before. And it's like, how do you kind of have some sense of security, but also some sense of control and over that? And I mean, I guess the thing about the internet in the first place is that a lot of people saw this as just a way to, as a great leveler, as a way of actually getting information across to people, no matter where you were, your background, and for a while, I think there was a lot of hope there, and over the last decade, especially, it's become a place where people are more and more concerned about it. It's almost like when Facebook brought everything you used to, when you see something on Facebook, you used to like it. And it was always a very positive action. And then they brought in all the other emojis, and then you could put the angry face next to it. And as far as I know, and I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would, if you put an angry face next to it, it would promote that more because that was a stronger reaction than if you put a like. And so it was almost as if anything that made you angry was like, right, this is great content. Let's just keep fostering that. And the media is the same. I mean, it wants reaction. Because it wants engagement, and anger is a stronger reaction than oh, I like that. And so it's almost as if it's like fostering sort of anger. But it is also really easy to just see that side of it and forget all of the incredible stuff that the web allows us to do. I mean, neither of us would have a business if it wasn't for the internet. And there's no way that we'd be able to promote our services, that we'd be able to collaborate online, that we'd be able to gain and learn and put out the information and the learnings that we have. And I think we've got to be so grateful for it. But
as a user and as a user of the internet, for yourself and for your business, and one who, what if you were based on what I'm giving this explanation on Web3, what? Because I think the question is also like, I've always thinking about this space when I've worked in a space on like, data, information of communication of data, ownership of data, privacy, transparency. It's like, you know, do people really care that much? Or are people really relatively fine? So I guess I'll ask you and I'll ask this to everyone, based on if there is going to be a Web 3.0 or when that materializes, what would you want that Web 3.0 to be like for you
Mm.
as a user of the internet?
All I can say is that there's uh, a browser, DuckDuckGo, that doesn't track your like data and doesn't take your location and use stuff to
Yeah,
filter the search results
yeah,
compared with Google. And honestly, I tried it for a while, but it was like I couldn't find anything I wanted
yeah,
because, and I guess the question is it because Google's just giving me what I want, and then so I'm just getting the information that I'm wanting, and it's just positive reassurance.
yeah,
But actually, I don't believe that. Like I genuinely have just found it like really really difficult to use
yeah,
because it's useful for me to be getting information about that's related to my location. If I want to if I want to look up the weather, it's it's no use me going on DuckDuckGo and getting the weather for
mm,
China. Like I want the weather for
yeah,
Hackney right now. So I think that's a really lame example, but that kind of thing is it's difficult because everything's been optimized. It's like you give us a little bit of data, we make your life easier.
yeah,
And but now it's like, okay, well, you're not taking that data. Now you've got to do the hard work yourself. So
yeah.
I guess it's that. It's like how do we make sure that I know nothing about Web3?
Like,
But that would be a question I would have is that okay, everything's decentralized, then how do we make sure that you're still getting the same function?
I guess it changed the relationship with consent, right? I think if you own your data, then you may have more choices of where you don't want your data to go. So I
Mm.
think it's that relationship of consent and ownership, who owns what, and that being clear. Because right now we don't own our tweets. We don't own our. Do we own our Instagram posts? I don't know how many of us look through those terms and conditions. And so I think there's an opportunity to. This is where open source technology comes in as well. It's like, I think, yeah, can data be owned by us? Do we care enough about that? Is that value exchange meaningful for us if we control that data? Is that burdensome for us? And what ways, and this is where design comes in, right? What products, what services, what systems gets designed in a Web3 world you know, where we own our content, we own our data, we have more control, um, and
Yeah.
it's beneficial. I don't know. It's an
Oh,
interesting thing.
it is interesting. You made me just think of one thing, and I think the thing that would really like change my mind about it pretty quickly was that if there's no reason why this would happen. There's plenty of other people in the world that it would be better to do this for. But if someone was to take an AI and or like train an AI based off every bit of content that I've ever put out, which is a lot. Like I'm online a lot. I put a lot of content out. There's plenty of places you could hear my voice. You could see what I look like. You could
Yeah,
read my content on LinkedIn. You could, sign up to my newsletter. You can do all of these things. But yeah, it could take all of that and it could basically just generate another version of me.
mm,
Then I would really feel like I'd lost my identity
okay,
because, and that would be weird.
yeah,
That would be very Black Mirror for me, and but perfectly possible because, as you say, everything that's once it's out, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It's out there.
it's out
It's out
there.
there to
Yeah,
be taken, scraped, used, fed
yeah,
into an AI, whatever. So,
yeah.
if anyone's thinking about doing that, please don't do that.
That's why I always say sometimes in some of my talks, the internet is a repository of evil. because when we polarize us, we are from user generated content. We this the stronger reaction has always been the negative side. It's so moving for us in the human condition to take that than maybe the positive side, and you train that to these models that have no context or no understanding of the human condition. That's what it might be driven to most times is a negative, and then you still have to have human input that tries to filter out these models. I just gave a lecture today, and I showed in one of my slides that there's been investigations on how some of our favorite AI chatbots to use workers in Kenya getting paid $2 an hour to basically make it less toxic because you
Yeah.
know they're our favorite tool, our favorite thing is also a repository of evil. But I guess rethinking the mundane. This is
This is
yeah,
not a mundane topic, I had to say. But it's funny because actually we just take it for granted, in the same way as we talked about light bulbs. Maybe we should say rethinking the things we take for granted. But I mean, it's a whole other episode to think what would happen if the internet just stopped. But
yeah.
we
Wow.
could do that maybe. I think we've certainly covered a lot of topics and we've asked a lot of questions. If anyone's got thoughts they want to add to this or want to ask questions that we can then address in the next episode, I think we could probably do a internet 2.0 episodes. But I think we could leave it there.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Lex. This
Thanks,
is going to
Joe.
be. I don't know if this is going to go out before Christmas, so maybe it won't.
Maybe
Maybe it won't. It probably won't. Anyway, if it's not, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Right.